But I'm going to bring on some great guests, and that's one thing this show has really done, is bring on thought leaders, policy makers, and innovators, right? We need every element of the ecosystem to create the symbiosis that is the European tech ecosystem. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to scale digital technologies going forward and use some real-life examples from some founders here today. So, friends, for the final panel of this afternoon, the discussion Scaling European Tech, please welcome Henna Virkkunen, Executive Vice President for Tech Sovereignty, Security, and Democracy. Henna! How are you? Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a seat. Come join us. And of course, two fantastic founders, Théau Peronnin, CEO and co-founder of Alice and Bob. How are you, my friend? Welcome.
Thank you.
Congratulations. You have heavy pockets right now, don't you? 100 million raised, EIC funded as well. We'll hear more about that in a second. And of course, Uljan, come join me over here, my friend. Sharka, founder and CEO of iGenius. Thank you, my friend. Come join us. Have a seat. So, we're going to do this free. I'll throw some questions out. We'll have a chat. We'll get things going. But I'll kick things off with you, Henna. So, given your role in safeguarding European tech and sovereignty and security specifically, how do you envision scaling digital technologies while ensuring innovation aligns with democratic views? We've spoken a bit of that today. Are they mutually exclusive? Should they be combined? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, of course, in the European Union, all our digital rules, they are very much based to democratic values. So we want to make sure that all our everything what we are doing in internet, everything what is digitalized, that we have a safe and fair and democratic environment also when it comes to digital spread. So, for example, everything what is illegal in our societies, it's also illegal in internet, for example. And we have tried to base now our rules that they are risk-based. So those applications which are posing more risks, there is also more obligations, for example, mitigate and assess the risks, for example, risks they are posing for our democratic systems. But in the same time, I want to also underline all the time that in the same time when we have certain rules, that we want to make sure that we have democratic, safe environment, fair environment, privacy is respected. Also, when we speak about on our digital environment, now our main focus is very much that we want to also create atmosphere and environment that encourages innovations and investments. And that is something to where we are now focusing as a European Commission much. Because often there's also fears that everything is, and not everything, but too many things are prohibited in our systems, or there is too much rules, there is too much administrative burden, and the people are not willing to innovate and invest in the European Union, and that we want to change. So we want to encourage innovations and investments, and we want to make sure that our rules are also innovation-friendly, and we are also implementing our rules in innovation-friendly manner, and we are supporting our SMEs and startups.
We'll take a policy angle first. I like that aspect. Théau, your business, I alluded to what you're up to at the moment. Tell us a little about the fundraise that's happened. Enlighten those who don't know about Alice and Bob. And I'm curious to know your opinion on what are some of the key strategies and elements that policy can combine to support other European tech companies to scale and grow?
It's kind of a tough one because, you know, entrepreneurship, there is such a fog of war when you're starting a business, when you're moving into a new field. You don't know how things are going to play out. And so you as a founder, you're pushing a vision, a belief, trying to create a very defensible asset because you're going to fight with incumbents that are orders and orders of magnitude larger than you. In quantum, for example, it's a great example of that, where you have some promising and very energetic startups competing with some of the largest companies out there. And so already as a founder, it's challenging to pick the right strategy, understand what are the key levers you're going to leverage to create this defensible asset. Now, as a policymaker, the job, I guess, is even tougher. Because now you're trying to support this emerging industry within this fog of war, while not completely grasping what are those levers the founders want to exploit. And so doing this the European way is much more tricky than in the US. They tend to deregulate a lot. This does not necessarily correspond to the way we think of things here in Europe. That doesn't mean that there isn't a solution. I think the spirit in which policy should be made when it comes to startup is to encourage the market, the startup market, to be as ruthless as possible. Companies must die much faster so that we recycle talents, we recycle funding, and we concentrate energy, resources, all into a few players, few winning players that will scale and scale much beyond Europe. Because the challenge we're facing at the moment is that we're competing for the European market with players that have their backbone elsewhere, that can finance their R&D through their overseas market, which is extremely challenging for us. So I would definitely encourage policymakers to think about doing more public procurement, fewer subsidies, to encourage this Darwinism, this fast-paced recycling of talents, so that European leaders can emerge very rapidly and guarantee this sovereignty, because we have the assets to play and win this game.
Yeah, well said. I'm curious, I want to get into that conversation of building businesses with policy as part of that, as a partner, if you will, right? You've just done that with your fundraise with EIC, and I'd be curious to know with Uljan as well, you were just talking about, just off stage with me, this massive project in Italy, right, that you just launched, and tell us a little bit about what you're building out in Italy, and was policy part of that conversation?
Absolutely. So we believe that there is not going to be a leadership in European AI without European infrastructure. Now, we all know we need to buy the chips from the US, but owning the infrastructure is the first step to actually build European AI. And then comes, how do you build it? What are the core values? And why do you build it? So for us, the how do you build it, it's important that we look at the needs of Europe and we don't just copy-paste that of another ecosystem. Some ecosystems build for performance. Other ecosystems should build for quality. If I had to pick one word for describing the European economy, whether that is talking about cars, food, or whatever, it's quality. Now we need to shift and have a strategy about how do we enable building quality powered by intelligence, not how do we manufacture intelligence and forgetting quality. So that why then leads you to actually start these projects in a different way. For example, you don't compare the size in terms of performance. If one ecosystem is investing hundreds of billions, it doesn't mean you necessarily need to invest the same. But of course, you need to be very scientific about what does it mean to be competitive. So at iGenius, we're building one of the largest supercomputers in the world, actually based in Italy. It's 115 billion operations per second, just to give you an idea.
Does anyone understand what that means? You might have to explain that, Uljan.
Absolutely. So we can actually compress time, because by making more calculations per second, so having a larger computer, you can actually train these AI models even with the personal computer you have at home. But that would take hundreds of years. So what these supercomputers do is actually compress time and enable you to iterate faster and be able to actually build larger brains that are smarter and that can help you to process data in such a way that you turn it from a database, a gold mine of information that sits somewhere in the organization, into a decision intelligence agent. And my last piece there is that once you have the infrastructure, once you have the strategy, then you need to focus on the core values. And I love the European strategy. We have been actually advocating and leveraging regulation as a competitive advantage, because we believe that there has to be a mission for this AI. And if that mission is to cut time, to cut 15 minutes a day, to shut down jobs, that's not an ambitious mission. We believe that this technology, for the first time, enables humans actually to increment and increase intellect instead of cutting time. So at iGenius, we say we accelerate minds, not minutes. Because you can get junior people become senior. You can get senior people have superpowers. You can actually increase the productivity of the ecosystem, but most importantly, close the digital divide and the skills divide. Because now, by humanizing technology, by making it a human right, we can enable every individual to compete on a par.
Yeah, well said. I'm going to throw a question out to the group as well, actually, and feel free to answer whoever would like to take it, or we can just spur on a conversation. And if you have a question, I'm going to pause towards the end, and we'll get some mics in the audience, and feel free to ask a question to anyone on the panel, all of us collectively as well. We'll get a dialogue going. But I'm curious, from the regulatory side of things and scaling challenges that come with that. We speak about this. You're in Italy now. We're in Paris as well. Congrats on the new fundraise, hiring new people. Is the US in mind? Did that change recently? I'm curious about where your minds think when you're both scaling, but from the regulatory side. So, the regulatory landscape in Europe, we can all agree, constantly evolving, right? As we heard earlier from Enrico, of course, former Prime Minister of Italy. What are the biggest challenges you face when scaling digital tech? And how might policy adaptations better support agile innovation without really compromising the core of European digital sovereignty? Henna, maybe yourself first, if you think about that on a hopefully a daily basis, right?
Yeah, I think today earlier already you have been speaking about startups and scale-ups here. And of course, this is something that when we look new digital innovations, we have huge potential when it comes to our startups. And especially we heard about AI, what kind of developments there is, for example, in Italy. And this is a certain field where we are now taking action. So on next week in the European Commission, we will decide on our AI continent action plan. So we want to become an AI continent, and now
what is that action plan?
Yeah, we will publish it on next week, and it will be like...
Spoiler. Any spoilers you can give us? You heard it here first, Summit 25.
It's going to be a roadmap of what kind of actions we are going to take when it comes to AI. But of course, now first thing to where we are investing, it's our supercomputers, like it was mentioned. So we have already made decisions that we are investing in 13 supercomputers all over in the European Union together with member states. So it means billions of investments. And the specific reason for that is that our startups, we have thousands of startups in the European Union who are working on AI, but often they are lacking access to computing capacity, as we heard. And that's why we are investing to computing capacity, that we can open up the capacity for our startups and also for our researchers to develop and train AI. So we will have 5 times more computing capacity in our supercomputers in this year time than we have now. And now we have already decided that we want to upgrade now our ambitions, and we want to also invest to so-called gigafactories, which are 4 times more powerful than the best supercomputers will be in the future. So we will open up also call for interest for that in the member states, that who is interested in. And there we are also building up private-public partnerships. Because in the European Union, we are often good when it comes to public funding. But as you know, as startup entrepreneurs, also that we often we are lacking access to venture capital. And that's why we are also working now with our Capital Markets Union in the European Union. So we just published our savings and investment strategy. And we are really trying to now remove the barriers from our single market and make sure that we have also access to capital for our innovative companies. So I think these are now very important fields when we look at challenges with our startups, which are really also hindering the possibilities to scale up in the European Union, that often we are lacking access to venture capital, and also we are lacking single markets. So we are also trying to remove the barriers between member states to make sure that we have one single market here, which is easier to operate for our startups. And so I think overall, also we have to reduce red tape and bureaucracy from our companies. So we are very committed also to simplify the processes. And also when it comes to digital rules, we are currently going through all our digital rules, and we have promised that we will do so-called fitness check for all our rules. And we will look also, because we know that there's overlapping parts and there's a lot of reporting obligations and bureaucracy, so we will cut all of that and we will simplify the processes in this year.
How does that speak to the founders? Because I think, we talk about regulation and the bureaucracy of that. The encouragement to entrepreneurs is to be scrappy. Right? It's to be a little bit all over the place until all of a sudden you're raising money and you have to sort of dot the I's and cross the T's. And did we ever sign a co-founder agreement? Are our shares actually given? Do we even own the parts of our company we think we are? But I'm curious, for you gentlemen as well, right? Uljan, I know you, was it 2016 the business was founded, right?
Correct.
And what was it? Isn't OpenAI was founded around the same time?
Same month.
Same month even?
Yes.
Okay.
When they say Europe didn't have the strategy, we were building a company that was actually focused on advanced conversational AI. OpenAI even started with a much broader search. So if you look at our first tweets, now you can call them X, actually we're talking about AGI and all of these topics back then.
Fantastic. How part of the conversation was staying in Europe, being in Europe at that time for you as a business, right? How far ahead were you looking? Did you feel comfortable then staying, or has it evolved to fit for you?
So I was working at Apple prior to iGenius in Silicon Valley, and I decided to come back to Europe because what I noticed with the adoption of Siri and technology becoming more human, people talking to machines, is that this is going to be a digital renaissance. And when you think of renaissance, worldwide, but if you think of renaissance, which continent better than Europe can lead a renaissance? Of course, if you talk from an experience perspective, right? So that was the first vision that we had, is we believe this is going to be more transformational than the printed press revolution more than 500 years ago. So our first roadmap was a 20 years roadmap. When we started in 2016, we sold our investors a 20-year long roadmap. That was a good decision because we were able to select the right ones. And we said, this is going to take time. And just to give you an idea, since we started back then, the computing power has been growing by 1,000 times. So every 3 years, we needed to reinvent the technology because more compute power meant that you could do things that you couldn't have imagined before. So one thing for us, when we think going worldwide, we see ourselves as a European unicorn with global ambitions. But we believe actually that in the longer term, Europe will be a better home to AI startups. I think the AI Factory is going to change that narrative already next year. If you look at tier 1 VCs in the Valley right now, they're actually funding their companies with compute. For example, A16Z, they're pitching this very hardly right now. They're saying, we're not going to give you money. We're going to give you compute because this is what you need to build AI. So you pay for people, you pay for compute, you have an AI company. So for us, it's all about the value proposition. So how do we fit in a global ecosystem, and how do we generate value in a way that is not just about being first or second? So we think Europe should build around the currency of trust instead of the currency of performance. Let's let OpenAI to pay the bills around performance. We think that by building around trust, we can push this idea that AGI is not a model, but it's the world. And we can actually put a piece into that vision and have a composable system while everyone is represented. For us at iGenius, this means building sovereign AI, and we don't see sovereign AI as European AI. Sovereign AI can be sold to US companies as well. Sovereign AI is about an air-gapped AI. Since AI is revolutionizing intellectual property, this is going to be existential for every organization on Earth. Doesn't matter if you are European, Asian, or American. So what we're doing at iGenius is we're reinventing the whole AI application stack. It starts with the foundational models. We now have shipped the largest LLM and most performant LLM in Europe. It's a 355 billion parameter model we launched 2 months ago. It's called Colosseum. On top of that, we have an agents platform, and then we have specialized agents. So by doing that, we have a vertically integrated system that can be fully isolated and that can give control to a government, a bank, or an industrial company to own their AI. We do not see a future where a dozen companies own the world's brain, because this means that every single piece of information these organizations are producing is being exported to these organizations. So that's not possible, because that would destroy the pillars of modern economy. So this is what we believe Europe should do, and we're doing our own part, of course, by building this sovereign AI system, but we think there is a lot of space into creating the currency of trust around AI. So this value chain is going to be a 10 trillion plus opportunity, and our aim is to build a 1 trillion euro big tech organization out of Europe.
That's impressive stuff, I think. And Théau, yourself, 100 million in the bag, still in the bank. Have you spent it yet? Not too fast, I hope.
No, working on that.
Working on that. But you mentioned that, working on that. So as I understand, just outside Paris, what is your roadmap looking like to maintain, that tech within the EU ecosystem? Or what's keeping you here for now? I say for now.
Yeah, the question you're asking is what's defensible in the way we're building a quantum computer. And what I see in many deep tech companies is too much trust in the fact that the initial innovation is some sort of cornered resource because you own the patent and you're secured. In our case, we do have a very strong initial technology, the CAT qubit, which is a new design of quantum bit that is meant for error correction, that dramatically simplified the design of the overall quantum computer by up to 200-fold. It's great, but that's only your entry ticket into the race. What's keeping us in this race is the innovation that we're deploying internally on how to improve faster than the competition or design, generation after generation, quarter after quarter, so that we survive the extremely strong Darwinism there is around compute. Compute is an extremely liquid resource. The minute NVIDIA produce a new generation of GPUs that are twice as powerful for half the energy consumption, everyone needs to update their infrastructure because of the change of OpEx and how it gets into the business model of the end user eventually. So this liquidity of compute makes it an extremely brutal field. So for us, the challenge and what we're working on is not to have, at one point in time, the best quantum computer, which we do believe we have at the moment, but it's to make sure generation after generation, by applying modern maths, by applying applied AI, if we want, it just, in our case, making things differentiable and streamline the whole design and control process, making sure we do that. In Europe, because we have the talents, we're better than most at maths, and this creates an extremely strong capital efficiency for us. And so when we raised 100 million, half of it is going to go into machines for prototyping, for validating the models, the way we design, and the other half is going to go into growing the team and the processes. Because I think the main challenges related to the title when we're discussing scaling European digital technologies is where to scale. Not where geographically, but on what dimension. Because scaling for scaling is absolutely pointless. You need to make sure that the way you're deploying capital, the way you're scaling, serves the moat you're building around your defensible asset. And this is the absolutely most tricky part of designing a proper business, is how do you ensure that you're becoming more and more defensible in that aspect? Because the minute you're starting to succeed, they will throw everything they have at you. And so even if your machine is 200 times more powerful and lets you compete shoulder to shoulder with Google, and even if it's followed suit by AWS, you need to be bloody sure you'll be able to hold your ground. And so this is what we're spending this 100 million on at the moment.
Well said. In terms of, we saw Google, what was it, I think, like 8 years ago, buy DeepMind, right? Which was a London-based startup out of Cambridge, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
Which was very early days. I think the first AI that could beat a human playing the computer, playing chess or something like that, they created, right? And they kept their offices in London, actually. Google DeepMind, I think they're in King's Cross and Pancras or something like that. They stayed for a very good reason, that the AI acts were being written at the time, and you know, they were very progressive at that point in that. So policy was the reason that they stayed within the EU, then at least. Now they're talking about shifting gears to other parts of Europe, understandably. What would either one of you do if you were policy leaders? I'm going to put this policy on the hot seat here, and let's have some fun with this, Henna. What would you do if you were leading policy in your domains of quantum computing, AI today, differently? Or what would you do? What would you want to see the roadmap entail going forward if you, both of you were in those seats, defining policy to help European startups scale?
Yeah, should I?
Yeah, please. Oh, you had an answer already, Théau, didn't you?
No, I
Came
mean,
ready for it.
in our case, it's pretty straightforward. The kind of technological leap quantum is about. It's about guaranteeing the core access, the access to the core resource of tomorrow's economy. The compute is increasingly becoming the enabler of the whole economy, the same way the energy was in the industrial era. So for us, to bridge, as a field of quantum computing, to bridge the gap between today's first prototype and large-scale, impactful quantum computers that are coming around 2030, what we need is more public procurement. At the moment, as we speak, DARPA is announcing, the US Defense Agency is announcing a massive competition to procure the best blueprints towards large-scale quantum computers. this is what we need in Europe. It's global competition, I mean, at the European scale, to create those emerging leaders and fuel them between the time where they have this great technological opportunity and the time where the whole market materializes and the policymaker can focus on making sure it's for good and not just about making sure there is something to protect initially.
Uljan?
So I think from a regulation perspective, what is already being put in place, it works great for us. You know, we turned it into a value proposition. What we're doing is actually leveraging the regulation not as a limit, but as a way to scale safely. Because when we talk about regulation, we always think about limit for scale. Instead, it is scaling safely. We've been embracing that. If we have to think about the next step, we believe that Europe is not going to lead AI by building, you know, iGenius, Mistral, Alice and Bob, and other companies like that into 1 trillion tech companies just for the sake of it. We believe that it has to match the needs of the continent, as the Vice President just said. So we need to look at how can we leverage this technology to elevate the capital markets? How can we leverage this technology to create the single digital market? Because if we can actually take the 50 industrial leaders of Europe, if we can take the governments, the European Commission through public procurement and turn those entities into technology companies, the growth that we'll be able to achieve, the efficiency that we'll be able to achieve would be an unlimited amount of resources for innovation. So then startups can surf literally on that growth. So if you have a car company go from a 50 billion euros market cap to a 500 billion or 1 trillion market cap, that growth is going to attract the 35 trillion euros of liquidity in between assets and liquidity sitting in European saving accounts into the market and then fund the system. We cannot think of creating startups artificially with public funding. We need to create the circular system that enables startups to actually to start and then grow. So this is the single next best action I would focus on. So identify those 50 traditional organizations in Europe and enable them to become tech companies and collaborate closely with the scale-ups. I think that would actually create the next generation of 1 trillion tech companies in Europe.
Please.
Yeah, so what we are currently doing, we are, like I said, we are investing to our infrastructure when it comes to AI, and really we are investing in computing capacity, but in the same time, when we are speaking about our supercomputers, we are creating them as AI factories, and it means that we are also bringing together talent and also data. And of course, data is now something we have to also work on in the European Union, because we know that we still have a lot of data which is not used, so we have to make sure that we have good access to data, also for the AI developers, and we are also working on that now. And then the third part is that how to make sure that our traditional industries, that they
light some candles. Here we go. Carry on.
that our industries and our public sector is also applying AI. So that's why it's important that we are bringing together our startups and AI developers with our very traditional industries, because only about 10% of our industries is using AI nowadays, and we know that they can be so much more productive when they are also using these new tools. So that is also something we are working now on, and we are also planning to open now different sectoral dialogues and discussions with the different industrial sectors, with automotive, with energy sector, also with the healthcare sector, that how we can support them also to use AI. And then, of course, the talent part is super important, because Europe is an aging continent. And when it comes to ICT sector as a whole, we are lacking very much behind of our targets, how much we should have specialists in this area. So we have to make sure that Europe is also an attractive place for talented people all over the world to come to Europe, start their businesses here, work here, and especially also we need skills on AI. And then fifth part of our strategy is also to make sure that we have innovation-friendly regulatory framework. And we are now, like I said, we are simplifying very much the processes, and we want to make businesses to Europe easier place for businesses. But in the same time, when it comes to AI, we want to really also create trustworthy AI, because we think that it's important for the future that the people can also trust to our AI system. So especially when we are having higher risks applications, when AI is used in the hospitals or in the transport, then those applications, they have to meet certain standards in the European Union, and they have to be tested before they are entering into the markets, because we think that it's important in the long term that we can encourage innovations in the same time, but also that citizens can trust to these systems also.
On that note, I want to hand it over to you, lovely people. Give us a wave if you have a question for anyone particular on this panel, or just in general the panel. We have two lovely ladies in the audience with microphones who I hope you can catch, because they will throw them at you. First question, over... Yes, gentleman, brave man over there. Give him a round of applause. Get that mic over to him. Here we go. Let us know who you are, my friend.
Paul Müller, I'm with DeepLight, a startup in Switzerland. Henna mentioned access to data as being critical for AI. There is always this trade-off between access to data and intellectual property. How do you see that in context of Mr. Trump's decision to let OpenAI do whatever they want?
30 minutes and we got Trump in. It's better than the other panels.
Yeah, that is of course also very important all the time, that we are able to also defend right holders' rights here. And this is difficult to balance also. We are discussing now in the European Union, for example, about creative sector and their role, because we know that also in the European Union we need European content to train AI, but also in the same time when you are using someone's work, of course, they should get fair compensation on that, that nobody shouldn't do business with other people's work without compensating that. And this is, for example, when we now speak about access to data and developing data, very difficult discussion we are also facing in the European Union. But I think it's important that we find the right balance here, and really that right holders, that their rights are respected all the time, of course.
Follow up to that, Uljan?
I think you can build models without having to infringe IP. You know, there is a way. We build these models. It took us longer. Of course, it's more painful, but you can do it. So it's all a matter of respecting that human right of individual freedom of owning your own information. And for businesses, there is a lot of discussion of how do you regulate the data going out of the network. Well, you don't have to do it. You just can bring the technology next to the data. You can actually build AI that is owned by the organization. Of course, that doesn't enable then centralized ownership that builds monopolies, which is what some, unfortunately, players are trying to achieve in the market. But if you build responsibly, there is a way to build models by respecting law, and there is a way to bring the AI next to the data and empower organizations to use it with a 100% compliance, because they don't need to change anything. They keep it within their own IT. So they just get the AI, bring it next to the data, and use all the data they have.
Okay. Yes, we have one over there. Can we get a mic to that gentleman down there? Feel free to stand up. Tell us who you are. I didn't say you could leave. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. He's got a phone call to make. Get the mic to that chap over there. Fantastic. Awesome.
I'm Jorge González. I'm the director of DPMed. We are an association. We promote innovation procurement and public procurement. So I have a question for Théau regarding, you say that we need more public procurement. So I would like to know more about your frustrations and your recommendations for the European Union to move forward in this topic.
You catch the question?
Yeah. Yep. Bigger, faster, less risk adverse. I mean, the whole point of procurement compared to subsidies is how much leverage on private capital do you get? And what muscles do you force the companies to build and strengthen? Public procurement challenges you on the end goal. You have to meet some requirements, no matter the path. When you're applying for subsidies, you have to convince on the plan, but you're not that much accountable on the results. And so I think it doesn't fuel the right mentality. What is absolutely incredible with procurement is how ruthless it is. You have a tender, you need to tick the boxes, and you need to be there on time and deliver. And this is really what we want for our European companies, tech companies. They need to be able to deliver at the global scale. And so those are the muscles we need to strengthen. The other thing I want is just less lobbying about the tenders, less over-engineering the specs of the machine. Let's just be brutal. You want a machine that computes, just set the bar of how much compute you want, the right level of challenge for the ecosystem, and let the ecosystem sort it out. Do not over-engineer the tenders, so that you can execute them very fast. And yeah, maybe 10 or 20% of those tenders will be failures, and you will be challenged on the fact that this is a poor use of capital. And when you think of how venture capitalists operate and think about startup, it's all about the average gain. And so, yeah, sometimes in the rush you make a few mistakes, but this is also how you do not miss the tempo, because the train is only going to come by once for each of those technological waves. We're present as a continent at the beginning of each of them, and we let so many of those go by. We have new ones, huge ones. Quantum is one, for sure. The timing is exactly now. The technology is right at the beginning of the inflection. This is now where we need to double down, pick our battles, and go all in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question from Isidro over there.
Thank you, Matt. Well, the question is to Uljan. Isidro Las Ballesteros, European Commission, and in the EIC and in the Startup Scale-Up Task Force. And the question is to Uljan. We have been having a coffee before. I have said to you how we have got an email, all the Commission offices, to encourage us not to, or to recommend us not to use commercial AI for our work because of confidentiality, etc. At the same time, we talk to the people, and all the industries are using that, and it's increasing the efficiency of what they do and how they do it. You have mentioned to me the concept of the air gap and how this allows to somehow isolate the service, the AI models, the data from outside. So in the air around the server, there are no wires getting the data outside. Could you elaborate a bit more on this concept and how this could be useful for organizations like the Commission, and where we could maybe store all the applications we get for the EIC, and we could get intelligence out of these applications for policy making, preventing others to get access to this information? William.
Thank you, Isidro. William.
Thank you. So when we talk about sovereign AI, usually we focus on one thing, and typically that is connected with hype. So sometimes it's compute, other times it's the models. Actually, sovereign AI is achieved when you have a full isolated system. We call it an air gap system because basically it has no backdoors. You can run it offline with potentially no connection from the outside. So most of the systems that we're using today have a backdoor. Sometimes it's for a very minimal part of the application. Sometimes it's like for 1 second, of data processing. But that means that we're bringing actually the information outside, and that's enough to not have control. So you invest billions and a lot of effort into consolidating 99% of sovereignty in the technology. If you just miss 1%, you lose it all. So it is possible today to isolate these technologies. For example, it took us 2 million engineering hours of work to build our own software, and to reinvent also the wheel on those things that you can buy for a few cents for 1,000 API calls and all of these things that you get almost for free from the American hyperscalers. But that's not actually a sovereign AI. So the way we think it should be done is that you should get your OpenAI through OpenAI and own it. You should fully isolate it. And there are so many European companies that can do it today, but they're not trusted. Because the first problem that Europe has with sovereign AI is that it doesn't trust itself. This is what we're seeing, right? So organizations don't trust European AI companies. So, and I think this is normal, because we're living in a culture of shame. If you make the wrong decision, you get responsibility about that. So I think we should change the narrative of the AI Act into the Trust AI Act, because the AI Act is all about building trust. And you get that stamp, you know, that you're respecting rules, you're prioritizing humans over technology, and so on and so forth. So to close on that, I believe that Europe has the chance today, not tomorrow, to have its own sovereign AI, its own air-gapped system, its own AI models. It's not about the models, it's not about the compute, it's about the full package. How do you build an AI operating system that unifies Europe into a single digital market? This can be done today, but it requires a very scientific approach to selecting these models. And just to give you an example of how crazy this is in terms of execution today and complex, right? So if you want to sell a model today to the European Commission as a European company, you can do it only through the American hyperscalers. So the only way to be trusted is to be in the catalog of Microsoft, to be in the catalog of Amazon, or to be in the catalog of Google, sometimes Oracle. That is crazy if you think about that. So if we need to actually achieve this goal, which we need because considering especially the geopolitical context right now, we need to build a European hyperscaler. And the AI factories were the first step. The gigafactories are going to make it possible. And I'm absolutely confident that in 20 years' time, we're not going to have just European AI for the good of Europe, but because the core values behind it are going to be necessary for everyone living in the world, because it will enable people with choice. So this is how I believe an air-gapped system should work, right? Build trust, and Europe can do it.
The AI Trust Act. We heard it here first. I think we'll have to wrap it up there. Time is up. Thank you, Uljan, Théau, Henna. Go and grab them for a conversation. I think we just started here. Thank you both so much. Come and join us for the wrapping up of all of this.